This episode of the Managing Madrid Podcast is brought to you by Intercontinental San Francisco Hotel. Their fine dining experience at Luz has just reopened. Savor California cuisine with hints of Latin American and European flavors at Luz. Chef Rogelio Garcia crafts exquisite dishes with seasonality and sustainability at the heart of his identity. Intercontinental is hosting the Managing Madrid Podcast later in July. We are coming to San Fran for preseason. We are also going to Las Vegas a couple days before for that game, and we're doing a podcast in both cities in person. So if you want to book your spot to our Vegas and San Francisco shows this month, make sure to click the link in the show notes and book your spot ASAP. Prices go up July 15th. That's in 5 days. And we would love to see you, and we want you to be a part of the Madridista party that is happening in those two cities. So come out. Coming up is a really fun historical segment of the Managing Madrid Podcast. We revisit Real Madrid's 2008-2009 season, give you all the background of the entire season so you can brush up on that part of Real Madrid's history. And specifically, we talk about Real Madrid's 3-2 win over Athletic Club in October of that year. And basically, that was right before everything fell apart. But the game itself was really fun. Higuain was incredible that game. And we have so much to break down from that game and that season. And I think you're going to really enjoy it. So enjoy it. Kick back with your beverage of choice. And we're going to get started with Ray Hudson and Derek Ray. Let's go.
Nice article in the Managing Madrid blog. Wonderful lads that do a great job there. And worth reading about that man there. Karim Benzema needs to rest, and the numbers reveal why.
Times ended up almost looking like a 6-3-1. Some very good writing about that on the Managing Madrid website. First-rate podcast as well. Of course, Pepe Valverde was a huge part of the equation.
Hello and welcome to the Managing Madrid Podcast on a Sunday night. We are hitting you back-to-back. Kiyan and Matt are here again. You're going to get sick of us because we're recording on Tuesday as well for our patrons. Tonight, we are doing a historical segment, and I don't know the exact date of our last historical segment, but it's been a long time. I think our last one was, according to my notes, I could be wrong, it was against Partizan Belgrade. The game that featured Gento and Pachin and Amancio, and it was a long time ago, in both the game itself and also the podcast itself. So we're back, a long overdue historical segment. We are talking about Real Madrid versus Athletic Club de Bilbao from the 2008-2009 season at the Bernabeu in October. And Matt suggested to do this game, and I'm curious to know why. So we can start by asking Matt why he was inspired to choose this game in particular, because it seems kind of random, and my initial thought to it was, wow, this is a really random choice. So Matt, explain your thought process behind choosing this one.
So there's a couple reasons why. One, I wanted to do a game from either this season or the season prior, just because I feel like we hadn't touched on any of the Schuster era and kind of the Calderon era besides the 2006 season. We've done, I think, maybe one or two games from there, but the 2007, 2008, I feel like is often kind of skipped over, even in Real Madrid history. And we had some fun players. Like we had Robben, we had Van der Vaart, Schneider, like all that Dutch contingent, Heinze, Gago, all these guys, and young Higuain. So all these guys that, I mean, that's kind of like, this is what I remember from my teenage years watching Real Madrid. And so like, I wanted to kind of go back and watch some of these games and see what I remembered, what I didn't remember. And so how I picked this one was, one, I wanted, besides like the criteria I just listed, but I wanted a game which wasn't against Barcelona, because I feel like we always do against Barcelona. And then two, was a La Liga game, not a big Champions League game. So I've upgraded to like Footbalia Premium, because I think everybody should do that. It's literally $20 a year, and it keeps that site going, and that site is literally a treasure. So please, anybody who's listening to this, it's $20. Like, it's not a big deal. Like, go and pay it, and keep that site around for as long as we can, because it is just amazing to have that. And so as part of a premium account, you can like put these filters on and see like epic comebacks or good games or early goals or stuff like that. So I put filters on to see like kind of what were one of the better games, and this was one of them from that season. So that's how I picked this one.
That's a great endorsement also for Footbalia. I didn't know that. I'm gonna do that too. It's a great idea. I think it's definitely a website that needs to stay alive. I think there was a period at some point, I think it was during the pandemic, where it actually was down for construction or renovation. There was some panic about not having it around, and I think just it was one of those moments where like, wow, if this is gone, it's one of those things you don't realize what you have until it's gone. It's an absolute treasure. It's an absolute gold mine to be able to go back and watch games from the 50s and 60s and 70s and so forth. Is a great privilege that we should not take for granted. So yeah, I would encourage everyone to do that, and I'm going to do that as well. So that's pretty cool that they have that filter as well. And I was thinking, because as I was watching this game, and by the end of it, and also digesting the fact what this season was as a whole, which I think we can do to set it up as the background to this game. After this win, there wasn't much to cheer about in this season. Actually, it was just horrible in the grand scheme of things. You know, this was maybe just kind of one random little victory before the collapse of the season. And certainly if you pick the Clásico from this season, it would be really torturous to watch, because both of them were terrible for Real Madrid, which we can also talk about. Why don't we do the background stuff? And you're right about like the fun players. It's a really weird era of Real Madrid's history, because it's right before we go and do that big 2009 summer and do that huge splash on Ronaldo, Kaká, Benzema, Xabi Alonso, etc. And it still has some really good players that were part of that core moving forward, like the Pepe. I mean, Pepe is the main one, really. Robben and Schneider, they obviously get phased out by then. Higuain was serviceable for a few years. I thought Higuain was awesome in this game. And Raul, on the end of his basically Real Madrid career, he has this plus another year left. But really, you can see in this game that he's just not the same player that from the historical games we're watching in 2002, 2001, 2000, etc. It's just weird. It's a transition phase, and you can see what the dead wood is. You can see the players that maybe need to go and the ones that didn't really pan out. But you can also see there are just some good things brewing, and it probably just needed some tweaks. And it was about to head into this era where Barcelona were beginning a dynasty. So it's a very interesting period in Real Madrid history. Do you want to give a little bit of a background on the season itself before we get into the game?
Yeah, I think you did a good job there, and I think it was a season where Schuster was coached to start the year, but he had just come off winning the league. The first time we had won back-to-back leagues in I don't know how many years, but it was after Capello had been sacked in 2006. Schuster came in to bring in more aesthetically pleasing football, and he did do that, and we ended up winning the league again. And it was actually a really successful season, that 2007-2008 year. And then we start off this year. We didn't really make too many signings. It was more kind of bringing guys back, like Ruben de la Red. I think Javi Garcia came back. I think Saviola may have been – no, I think we signed the summer before. But there weren't really any big signings that year. It was kind of more just keeping with this title-winning team and keeping all those pieces together. The season starts with Ruud van Nistelrooy, I believe, getting like a very serious injury, and he's basically out for the whole season. And that was almost kind of the beginning of the end of Ruud's Real Madrid career. He would end up staying another season with Benzema, Raul, Higuain, Cristiano Ronaldo, all in the same team, which is like crazy to think about. But he really didn't have much of a Real Madrid career after that knee injury. And it was a season where Schuster, I think, got fired early on, like in the fall, even before the first Clásico of the season, I think. Juande Ramos comes in, tries to change things up. It doesn't really work, and we just sputter, and it's a horrible, horrible season. And I think in this game, this specific match, as fun as it was, and as like there's a lot of great things we'll talk about, I think there were a lot of things where you're like, wow, it's like this comes off against Athletic Bilbao in La Liga, but you come up against a really good team, this team will get torn apart. And that's exactly what would happen to this team is they go up against Liverpool, get destroyed 4-0, should have been 8-0, lose 6-2 to Barcelona. Like the writing was on the wall for the team. You could see it.
Yeah. And the only things I'll have to add, so just to elaborate on the transfers. So that summer before, and keeping in mind, again, this was a back-to-back title-winning team, which included the 4-1 win over Barcelona in the Pasillo year. That was part of the back-to-back titles. So they were in a decent spot heading into the season, and it just kind of coincided with the fact that some players got older. Some of the players that I think we had hoped would take a leap didn't. Gago is one of them. Salgado, someone like him, he was actually a right back that was very difficult to replace, and we didn't really get that replacement until Carvajal came along. You talk about not being able to replace the Makelele void until Xabi Alonso eventually came. The right back position was definitely a void for us because we tried a few things there. We tried the Cicinhos, we tried I think Carlos Diogo at one point. Then we had Arbeloa come in. Carvajal was the one who finally gave us something at that right back position. So departures that summer before the season starts. Robinho goes to Man City. Baptista goes to Roma. Soldado goes to Getafe. Cassano goes to Sampdoria. And those are the main ones. Granero goes to Getafe. Pablo Garcia leaves, goes to Greece. Ezequiel Garay goes to Racing Santander. And obviously Ruben de Ler, as his career is over by that point, unfortunately. And then coming in the winter window, which I guess was after this game, right? Huntelaar last, the double whammy in the winter. And then Van der Vaart had just arrived that summer. That was like our big signing. And that was it. Plus the ones you mentioned, like the Javi Garcias, etc. So, and the other thing I would add, the context of the season. So this game that we're covering today was in October. Pretty much like in the next month or so after this win, Real Madrid win this game 3-2 over Athletic. There's a lot of injuries that come through. And there's the famous quote. Actually, it's funny because just not long ago, I think maybe a month ago or so, around the same time, I think you wrote about Ivan Helguera on the site in your Monday musings. I did a quick podcast. It was a daily drop, maybe like 10, 15, 20 minutes or something. It was an excerpt from my book, and it was about Schuster and that season. And I mentioned that season around December when the Clásico de Camp Nou was rolling around. We were decimated by injuries, and Schuster has a famous quote, "It's impossible to beat Barcelona in this situation." Which is like, he's not necessarily wrong, but you can't just say that. You can't be a Madridista who believes fighting until the end and having honor and all this stuff and then say that publicly before the game has even started. And Raul, and I think one of the other players, can't remember who it was, came out and publicly denounced that. Like, no, like, we're Real Madrid, we're going to go and try to win that game. And that game is we're going in there so banged up, and then Schneider gets injured in the Camp Nou, and then Miguel Palanca is one of the kids that comes on that like no one's ever heard of, and no one ever heard of again after that game. And it's just a guy we'll never forget because it was like 10 seconds, like who's that guy? And it's especially like that was 2008, so that was before like now like fans are knowledgeable. We kind of like we know who the players in Castilla are or whoever. That back then we didn't really have that democratized information and that much coverage on Castilla or whatever, so we didn't know. Anyway, so and then we lose that game 2-0, only 2-0 somehow. Could have been much worse. And then obviously what later ensues that season is the 6-2 and Liverpool 5-0 on aggregate over 2 legs. Okay, so that's all I wanted to add in terms of the context of this season. And I just remember I interviewed Juande Ramos at one point a few years ago, and he told me, because he's the one who comes in for Schuster mid-season, and he told me that the reality is that no one was competing with Barcelona. Like Ramos like has like the poor Juande Ramos kind of comes in, and he's like the guy who will forever be attached to the 6-2 and the 4-0 to Liverpool and Barca. And really, there's nothing he could have done. Like that. They basically gave him a wheel that was already out of control. Like there's nothing he could have done to steer it correctly. All right. Can you give us a starting lineup for this particular game that we're covering?
Yeah, so this is a fun starting lineup. For Madrid, you have 27-year-old Casillas in goal, 33-year-old Michel Salgado at right back. Sergio Ramos was on the bench for this one. I'm not sure why, but he usually would play right back, but he was on the bench for this one. 25-year-old Pepe partnered with 30-year-old Gabriel Heinze. You had 20-year-old Marcelo at left back, Gago, Schneider, and Van der Vaart in the midfield. So not much balance there, and we'll get into that. And then Robben interchanging with Higuain on the wings. So they were right and left wing. Higuain was only 20 years old in this match. And Raul, 31-year-old Raul, was up top. And then for Athletic Bilbao, they had some names that I'm sure many people will recognize. Fernando Llorente, only 23 years old in this match, was up top. Yeste, the number 10, the famous number 10, was playing just behind Llorente. Areola, the current Rayo Vallecano coach, was their right back, bombing down the line. Who else was in there? Echeverria. Yeah, Echeverria. He was great in this one. And then Amor Bieta, of course, the famous for getting tons of red cards and violent tackles, was also part of this Athletic Bilbao squad.
Yeah. I thought, so this was interesting to me because kind of looking at some of the pieces, and by the way, Amor Bieta got a red card in this game, literally too. I guess some of the things that, there's no way I'm really remembering off the top of my head what happens in a game like this. So when I watched it, it's like watching it for the first time. It's, I really had no recollection of it. And I thought some of the things that surprised me, I don't know if surprised is the right word, but I at least thought were really interesting. I mean, maybe I just forgot how good Higuain was. And also how versatile he was. When I look at the lineup, I kind of expected Raul to be the link-up guy and dropping deep, but it was really Higuain doing so much dirty work in midfield, dropping deep, trying to win the ball. He was everywhere, and he was just awesome. And he's so good at like getting on the end of crosses and getting himself into goal-scoring opportunities. I mean, he really was so mobile. He wasn't just like the traditional number 9 that maybe he developed into later in his career, but like, it's hard to remember now, but when he came over from River initially, he was kind of like a right attacking forward more than a striker, right? And so he was able to create chances and ultimately was criticized heavily for missing a lot of chances, but then was able to fix that and start to score goals. So that's something that caught me by surprise. And I actually thought Higuain was the standout player.
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought this up nice and early, because for me, if anything, this was the one thing that didn't surprise me, because I remember I was obsessed with Higuain. Like, I was the flag bearer for him because none of my friends watched La Liga, and I would talk about him and rave about him. And I even got a Higuain Real Madrid jersey. Like, that's how much I liked him. And so I truly believe if he didn't get that herniated back disc surgery that he got, it was right when Mourinho came in at the start of the year, I think he would have had an incredible career. Would have been he ended up being one of the best strikers in the world, and was a great striker in world football and had an incredible career. But I think he would have been even better. And I think he would have been this version you saw if he could have stayed fit and like just electric like he was today. Like, this was him. This match was him this whole season. This is how he played every single game all season. He was by far and away our best player. And I'll never forget the game where he scored 4 goals against Malaga and we won 4-3. And it was literally just Higuain put the team on his back and scoring ridiculous goals. And I think 20-year-old Higuain, like, this was him at his best. And it makes me think what could have been if he didn't have that back surgery. Because I really, really think he was had all the talent in the world to be one of the best strikers. Like, he didn't even play striker in this match. Like you said, he basically played left and right wing, was everywhere, linking up, driving, dribbling, shooting. He hit the crossbar. He scored 2 goals. When he hit the crossbar, he literally took the ball off Robben, who was doing his characteristic Robben cutting in from the right onto his left foot, about to shoot, and Higuain just takes it right off him and hits the crossbar. And he was just great. I mean, he was great, and this was Higuain that whole year.
Yeah, and he also his dribbling was impressive to me. Like, his little shoulder drops, cuts outside, cuts inside, cutbacks in the 6-yard box to set up his teammates. His dribbling was really good. His shooting was I mean, that one-time shot that hit the bar. He had a few that were definitely wayward, but he's just so good at getting on the ends of chances, the off-ball movement. And what was interesting to me also was that he was often kind of Gago's first vertical outlet. You know, he would show every time Gago had the ball. And Athletic weren't pressuring Gago at all. And so they would basically let Gago have the ball, and then Higuain would show for him and give him something to hit. So the back injury that you speak of, he missed 26 games over the course of 122 days from November to March in the 2010-2011 season. I do wonder if that didn't happen where we would speak about him and what would have happened to Benzema in some way.
Because he was in front of Benzema at that point. So that first year Benzema came, it was Ronaldo and Higuain starting up front for Pellegrini. And then even when Mourinho first came in, it was Ronaldo and Higuain. Higuain was the one up front. And it wasn't after that back surgery that things started to go downhill for him.
What would you say is his best season? I'm looking at the stats now. 2009-2010, so the year after this, he scored 27 goals in La Liga. That's absurd.
He was really, really good. Yeah. So I was going to say, I mean, these 2 seasons were, even the year in 2012, he was great, but I still don't think he was as just fit and electric as he is now. Like, after that back surgery, I felt like he gained a little weight and just wasn't the same in terms of his quickness and sharpness. And these years, 2009, 2008, at the tail end of 2007, he was so fun to watch.
Here's one for you too that is interesting. So that year, 2009, 2010, the year after, I think he was second in the league in scoring. In the 2011-2012 season, first in all of the big 5 European leagues combined in non-penalty goals per 90. There was definitely a period where he was one of the most feared strikers in Europe at Real Madrid. He definitely was when he went to Napoli. He was insane in Napoli. From 2014 to 2016, that 2-year range at Napoli, he was insane. But there was definitely periods at Real Madrid where he was very feared. And I remember this season in particular, I have one Kool-Aid friend that I haven't talked to in a few years, actually, but he was someone that I really respected, and he was very knowledgeable. And, I told him, I was like, I don't want to face you guys this year. I was really, really worried. But he would always say, you guys have Higuain. He's one of the most scary players to play against, and because of him, I don't rule you guys out of anything. That's the kind of player we're talking about. So it was just nice to see him. He's young here, and he's doing so much. You could almost see it in your brain that he has a trajectory, kind of like Raul, where he comes in at first, he's over eager, he misses a bunch of chances, but then gets acclimated to the flow of the league and gets used to it and starts scoring goals. I mean, and again, because he was doing so much more than scoring in this game, it really just piqued my interest of wow, this is really, really impressive stuff from Higuain.
I mean, to put it into context, he's a year younger than Vinicius in this match. So Vinicius was last season. So it shows you just how good he was and how much of a talent he was at just 20 years old.
And he's often the one we bring up when we before last year, when everyone was saying, can Vinicius take the scoring leap? We always brought up Higuain as the guy who was the example of someone who couldn't finish, but then started to finish at an insane clip. The other one that stood out to me because I had two standouts, positive standouts in this game. One was Higuain, and I had one for the back line too. So
I'm interested if this is the same as mine.
Probably. I mean, but maybe not. Who was yours?
Heinze.
Yeah, he was awesome.
I was really surprised.
Playing
at
Heinze. Center back, which is something he did sometimes.
I did not remember. The thing that I didn't remember was how good he was playing out of the back and like playing line breaking passes and progressing the team up the field. Like he would play dagger balls through multiple lines into the attacking midfielders or into Higuain or whoever it was, and I was like, "What? I don't remember Heinze doing this." Like it was almost like Alaba. Like I just didn't expect it and didn't remember it.
I actually almost wonder, would he have been a better center back as a left back? Because a left back, he was really good. Like defensively, he was awesome, and from a ball progression standpoint. But he wasn't like the guy like a Marcelo or Roberto Carlos who would like burn players in the final third. So I wonder if he would have been a better solution at center back. There was that period where I guess just before this, maybe 2006, 2007, where you had the Ramos, Pepe, Cannavaro, and Heinze backline, and it was so good defensively. Yeah. But I almost wonder, like in a pickle like this, sometimes you just discover things. And Heinze was really good in this game because he was reading every ball into the box. He was winning every 50-50 challenge. Like you said, the ball progression was on point. He had an incredible pass for the go-ahead goal in the Schneider goal, the 1-0. Yeah. So he was another standout for me. And then I have other players who stood out maybe for the wrong reasons, for lack of a better word, that I thought had a poor game. But what is it? What do you think the natural kind of direction from here is? What is it that stood out to you?
Maybe we kind of go with a little bit with the flow of the game, and flow of the game and kind of like just player personnel. Wesley Schneider nearly scored from halfway, like in the matchup, and I thought he started the game well, like was good in the first half, and then kind of faded in the second half. But he had a lot of nice touches, was finding pockets of space. He and Van der Vaart both were finding like good little pockets of space. Robben, Higuain were doing the same. And it was just funny because I felt like this team saw why they would get sliced open, because they played such high risk, high reward football. I felt like everybody was always looking to play a dagger through ball. And then if they lost it, Athletic Bilbao was just positioning counterattack. And like, yeah, okay, if it doesn't come off, they're coming at you. But if it does come off, you can score a goal. And sure enough, like a lot of the goals we scored kind of came off of that. Like even the disallowed Higuain goal early on came from just a dagger through ball. He does a beautiful kind of like backwards turn and then finishes it really nicely. So Higuain ended this match with 2 goals, a disallowed goal and a crossbar. But Schneider, like the Schneider goal you mentioned, was pretty early on, and Heinze feeds it into him, dagger through ball, and he does a very similar turn to Higuain. What I liked about what Schneider did, though, was he turned with his right foot and then finished it, bullet finish with his left foot. And I forgot how ambidextrous he was. Like he had that ability to use both feet. And he was good. He was solid in the beginning. Like I said, faded. And I think it just kind of took me by surprise, like how often, like everybody, Gago, Van der Vaart, Robben, Schneider, even Heinze, they would all try like these dagger through balls to try and beat Athletic Bilbao. And yeah, ultimately it led to a win, but it was a crazy 3-2 win with plenty of chances for both sides.
Yeah, well, we definitely made the more chances, and I think if the disallowed goal was incorrectly disallowed, and because it wasn't offside, there was another breakaway at the end where Guti comes in and plays a beautiful through ball. That wasn't offside; it was called offside. It would have been another breakaway, and then you had a questionable penalty call for Athletic's second goal. So I think in the grand scheme of things, Real Madrid definitely deserved to win this regardless. But definitely there were moments, like there are in any Real Madrid game, that they dominate often. They will concede their chances on the break. One thing that did strike me is how bad Athletic's defense was. I mean, the fact that we had so many like breakaways or near breakaways or breakaways that were wrongly called offside, the high line was a mess for Athletic. We always just had these players open to hit. And even the Schneider, like, so we're still on the subject of Schneider. The second goal, was set up with a vertical pass from him to Van der Vaart too. We had a beautiful one-touch flick and gets it to Higuain. Higuain finishes it beautifully. Both of those finishes, the 1-0 and the 2-0 from Schneider and Higuain were perfect. I mean, the Schneider left-footed far post, like just that goal in general is one of my favorite goals in football. It's really hard to stop. And the Higuain goal was just a testament to, it was just an example of how clinical he can be. It was a great finish. He didn't panic. He placed it. The goalkeeper had no idea where it was going because I think his line of sight was blocked by his own player. It was a great finish. But definitely the Athletic defense was all over the place for me. What was your impression of kind of how the midfield functioned? The Gago, Van der Vaart, Schneider trio.
Yeah, so that's where I felt like you could easily see how Real Madrid fell apart in games later on in the season against better teams. And even in this game, there was just so much space between the three of them. And Van der Vaart and Schneider wanted to venture forward and really just play as attacking midfielders, which is what they were, being pigeonholed into a 4-3-3 system with a guy who should probably be in a just a sound double pivot. Like, honestly, I think Gago, he gets a bad rep for his time at Real Madrid, but I think he's a quality player and would have, like, if you put him Tuchel's Chelsea and you replace Jorginho with Gago, like, I think people rave about Gago. He needs to be in the right system. He's not like athletic enough to be a lone pivot, especially in a midfield with Van der Vaart where he has to run everywhere. And so I think Gago got made to look worse than he really was because of the Real Madrid era and the time he played in. But like, if he were playing today and he were in like an actual system and could play in a double pivot with somebody, I think he'd be great. I think he'd be a solid player and would play for a top club in Europe. So, but yeah, Gago was literally on an island most of the time. He's the lone defensive midfielder. He's not an athletic guy. He's not particularly fast. He's more of a deep lying playmaker. He's more of a Busquets. And so it's like leaving Busquets to just try and chase and run after things, and that's not going to be Busquets' game. And so he was really left wanting. And it was actually surprising to me, though, Van der Vaart occasionally, of the other two, like number 8s, I guess you would call him, Van der Vaart would be the guy that would slide in as more of like a double pivot to try and help and would play the defense. And somebody who surprised me quite a bit with how much he tracked back was Robben. I did not expect him to track back as much as he did. And so, like, Real Madrid, eventually they would just get players back and try and collect their shape after slowing down Athletic Bilbao in transition. But you could see the whole, like, the midfield is just so spread apart.
Yeah, the not that there was a press, but I think the initial line of defense was incredibly penetrable and permeable. And it didn't take much for Athletic to kind of just pass through a few players who weren't doing much behind the ball. And again, like, players were left on an island and stuff like that. So back on the Gago point, I think to me his passing wasn't good enough. One of the things that stood out to me
I liked his passing. I don't think his long-range passing is good, though.
I think, to me, like, for example, this game in particular, for the amount of space that Athletic gave him, I thought he could have done much better. And when he was under pressure, some of his touches weren't that good. I don't know. Maybe I'm just really scarred and harsh on Gago, but I expected better from him in his Real Madrid career. And I think, like, part of, unfairly, he was always compared to Fernando Redondo because he came from Argentina. He played a similar position. His hair bounced the way Redondo did, and he was like the guy who was supposed to be elegant, right, and graceful on the ball. His tackling was great. I mean, he kind of had the Camavinga tackle where he can dispossess opponents who are like just ahead of him. But I think the overall, like, I don't think he had the true comfort on the ball and the leadership and the organizational ability of Redondo. And again, not that that's like a fair barometer, but I just don't know if he had it. And again, like, you've seen it so many times. Like, as you said, we saw it later in the season. I mean, one of the most painful things I've ever seen is him and Lassana Diarra together, like, just completely out of their depth in midfield against strong teams, chasing shadows and not knowing where they're supposed to be and what to do. I mean, it's one of those, I don't know, I'm just not sure ultimately if he was good enough for Real Madrid. And that's kind of where I stand.
No, that's fair. I mean, injuries definitely took a toll on his career.
Yeah. He was not able to stay healthy for long periods. Well, I don't really remember his stint at Roma, though. Do you? Like, how did he do there? Do we know?
He was just injured everywhere he went. He just kept getting the same ACL knee injury. I remember one game I watched for him when he was like at the end of his career playing for Argentina, and they subbed him on, and he got that same ACL knee injury, and he tried to just keep playing because he was just so upset that he got it again. Like, he was just hobbling on the field, and it was really depressing to watch. And that was just kind of the story of his career. Like, he played at Valencia. People forget that. Like, he played at Valencia, Roma. He kind of bounced around to random clubs. Yeah. And he's just been injured. He was basically injured the whole final part of his career.
Maybe I'm also there's a couple more things I'm scarred about, because our midfield in general from 2003 really till 2000. What was the year that Modric came?
2012.
I swear it was like 9 to 10 years of terrible midfields, because
yeah, it was.
When we lost Makaleli and Cambiasso.
Well, the Xabi, Alonso, Khedira, Ozil was pretty good, though.
That was decent. Xabi Alonso, but then the Xabi Alonso plus last was not good.
Yeah.
I guess my point is, like, when Modric and Kroos came, and like to me now we have Modric and Kroos and Camavinga and Tchouaméni and Fede Valverde, and in years past even I was really happy because we had signed a young talented Ceballos and other people I'm forgetting, I'm sure, Kovacic. And I felt like I never took that for granted. I was like, this is my standards were so low, and I was so beaten down from seeing all of these terrible midfielders we had signed. And maybe terrible is the harsh word, but like now I have ingrained in my brain that Kroos, when he has the ball and he wants to switch it, it's just this symphony. It flows effortlessly he's not even thinking. It's mechanical. Like, bring the ball down, accurate, perfectly weighted switch. Gago had a couple switching opportunities in this game, and it was like always short, or like always like he could just not pull it off. And so that's what I think about. Like, we're just now we've fixed that problem, but our recruiting in midfield and our decisions for squad building there at that time were terrible. And I'm not saying Gago was a bad signing, because I think it's great to take a gamble on a talented young player like him, but I don't think he panned out the way we were hoping he would. And by the way, didn't you I noticed the bounce when Guti came in. We gained a bounce in midfield. Some brains, some genius passing. Yeah,
and it just. But even with, like, it would be either Gago, Schneider, Guti, or Gago, Schneider, Van der Vaart. Like, that's not a midfield. Like, that has no balance whatsoever. But to your point, it was almost a decade of that, of just like these midfields that really make no sense, even on paper. Like, yeah, it's a good like, individually, these are good players, and you put them in the right spot and they'll do well, but you didn't put them in the right spot. You didn't put them in an environment to succeed. And so, yeah, of course it looks like a disaster. And of course we're scarred, because it really was like, you just think, like, there's nothing there. Like, of course that midfield gets overrun. Just saying it out loud, I could tell you that it's going to get overrun. And I didn't even have to watch the game to know that.
Another thing that maybe pleasantly surprised me, it's very interesting because you have the old guard at right back and the young guard at left back. So as you said, Ramos is not playing this game. You got Salgado playing at right back. I was actually pretty impressed with Salgado. I don't have great memories of him in his older age, but in this game, I thought he was pretty good. His dribbling was, he kind of turned the clock back a little bit. I mean, at his peak, his dribbling was amazing. He could get past players and put in a good cross in. He was really good defensively. His offensive side of the game was really impressive at his peak. In this game, he had a couple moments where his dribbling was impressive. And his 1-versus-1 defending versus Balenciaga was pretty good. The only thing I think he was kind of out of depth was that, like, if there was like a 50-50 physical duel, I don't know if he had the muscle to come out of it on the right side of it, but I was impressed given his age. And he wasn't even that old in this game, but he definitely wasn't the Salgado of like 2000, 2001, 1999, etc.
Yeah, I think this was last one, right? To your point on the physical duels, like, he got beat up on a couple of them, just died. Like, he would put his body on the line for some of these headers and just collide and just get destroyed. But yeah, he was good, and that was pretty rare for him at this stage of his career. But he was good in this one. I just felt like even though he was good, you could kind of tell that, like, he got away with it on almost every play. You know what I mean? Like, he like, you knew he did just enough, and it was like killing his body. It looked like he was killing his body to get through the 90 minutes, but he did it, and he just enough to like win all his duels and do well. Like, he was probably done for 2 weeks after this and like needed an ice tub for 5 days straight or something.
Yeah, he was definitely icing after this one. What about on the opposite flank? Thoughts on 20-year-old Marcelo?
I was surprised at how he really didn't leave his position. He didn't really make any forays forward. And I think what often gets forgotten about this version of Marcelo, the really young, like 18, 19, 20, 21, prior to Mourinho coming, prior to the Afro growing out, was how quick and fast he was. Like, he was really fast when he was that age. And I felt like you didn't get to see much of it in this match. Maybe a few flashes, but he was, I was surprised at like kind of how rash he was going into some challenges. He definitely shot in a red card in this game, and the commentators were like, "Muy roja, muy roja," like, just kept saying after the tackle. And and did you see, like, even after Athletic Bilbao the penalty kick, like, they ran over to Marcelo didn't give away the penalty kick, Heinze did, but they ran over to Marcelo and like slapped his face and like got in his face. And so I don't know. I just didn't remember Marcelo being kind of a guy that would get riled up or would kind of rile up the other team. But that definitely was a factor in this match.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see the more raw version of him, and I think someone who maybe is not able to manage his emotions as the later version of Marcelo could. It's really super weird to see him with a buzzed head too. I feel like the maturation and transformation and the talent with the Afro was like he went to another level with that thing. But this version of him, I mean, you could kind of see hints of future Marcelo in that he had a couple defensive gambles where he's just like lunging into a tackle and he gets burnt. But then there were a couple moments where he is able to drop his shoulder in the final third, get a good cross in. So there were a couple, like, even like he didn't venture forward much, but you could tell Athletic did not really have fun dealing with his dribbling ability even at that age. But there was definitely, like, to end the first half of this game, it got really heated and pretty violent. And I feel like it did revolve around Marcelo to an extent, because there was a bit of retaliation from him towards the end of the first half, where first of all he gets decked, and they I forget which Athletic player comes in at him, and then like a minute later he goes in hard, and I think that's the challenge that you said might have been a red card, and athletic players just come flying in to shout out Marcelo. There was definitely the end of the first half was quite violent. There was also a Pepe moment, just a vintage Pepe classic moment in the second half where he kicks the ball at one of the athletic players who was on the ground, and then Fernando Llorente comes over, pushes Pepe with a nudge. Pepe goes flying. It was good that we were treated to a Pepe moment in a random game in 2008.
Yeah, it was classic Pepe. It really was. I was thinking to myself, oh, God, this is. I think this was definitely before the Casquero moment because that was at the end of the season. So that was
that the same season?
Was like, yeah, it was the same season. That was the most infamous Pepe moment. But maybe this was kind of like a foreshadowing of that because he just, no need for it whatsoever. Athletic Bilbao players down on the ground and he just kicks the ball at his head while he's down at the ground. Ref had already blown the whistle. So not a great image. But yeah, I think one player I wanted to talk to you about, since we kind of had been raving about him earlier in the week, but in this match, it was tough going, was Raul. Like, I don't think he barely even touched the ball. I thought he was probably the worst Real Madrid player on the pitch. Am I being too harsh?
No, I don't think so. I actually, one of the weird things that I was looking, because I knew he was getting subbed because I looked at the stat sheet in this game before I finished watching it, and I knew that he was getting subbed at the end, and I was actually curious to know how the Bernabeu would have reacted to a performance like this, and they did give him an ovation, probably because Real Madrid were winning. But so one of the things that struck me, as I said earlier in the podcast, that I'm more used to watching him at his peak be the one dropping deep for the link-up play. And he was kind of invisible. He was the highest player up the pitch. Didn't get involved much. The couple times he had the ball, didn't do much with it. I mean, he had one chance in the box, and I don't know what minute it was because we don't have the minutes on this broadcast, but he just hits this really, really tame shot into Iraosa's arms. And he just didn't really have... And this is what... Like, you know, Ohm and I were talking about this on the mailbag last week. He's like... This is because he joined the fandom in 2009, and he's like, this is what I thought Raul was. So that's why I never understood why everyone raved about him, because like I just thought he was this random guy who couldn't play football. Mind you, Raul did have a couple good seasons at the end of his Real Madrid career, but you can kind of see him. He's just not the same. He's just not the same player at this stage. He's not getting involved. He's not doing much, and he's a bit poor.
Yeah, like I think he was good in 2006 and 2007, Capello year and the first Schuster year. But even then, to your point, like he was just different. I don't know how to put my like thumb on it, but he was different, like less agile almost. And he didn't have that same youthful exuberance, but he was so classy, like just such a classy finisher. And like if he got put through 1v1, like you knew it was going to be a goal. I never really worried when Raul was put through or had to make a finish, because I always knew, like, especially, I don't know, I felt like, I don't know if this is something nostalgia or just kind of a feeling I have, but it just felt like strikers like Raul and Ruud van Nistelrooy, like no matter what, it got into certain situations, I put my house on them finishing. Like I had zero doubt whatsoever. And I don't know that I get that same feeling with strikers in today's generation. And I don't know if that's just because I've watched so much more football now, and or I don't know what it is, but like I just always felt like with certain types, and like Ruud van Nistelrooy and Raul were the perfect example. Like it got in a certain situation, I had zero doubt whatsoever that they would finish.
I mean, it's possible that maybe as youth we were just more impressed and more conscious of these things. I mean, now obviously if you put like the Lewandowskis, the Haalands, or Luis Suarez at his peak in front of goal, they're going to finish those chances, you know. Back then, I do remember like that era, whether it was Raul or Van Nistelrooy or people like Henry, Shevchenko, Batistuta, those guys were so lethal every time they had a chance. Hernan Crespo, those guys. Yeah, I think Raul with him though also he was the tenacity that he had as a younger player just didn't exist later on. It wasn't something was missing emotionally, mentally, everything. Like it just and it fed into it. And again, we talked extensively that he had marriage problems and stuff like this, and that may have affected it. But either way, the tenacity that Higuain had in this game is something that Raul used to have, earlier when he was younger. What else did I want to talk about? I think there are other things I want to talk about, but the main talking points I thought we addressed. So, what else did you want to hit
on? Just kind of from the Athletic Bilbao perspective and some of the trouble they gave us. I think it was kind of the players you would assume, who I named at the start of the broadcast, like who you would assume would give us trouble, did give us trouble. So Fernando Llorente was really awesome. Difficult to deal with for both. Yeah, he's just a tall, lanky, powerful striker that just was a nightmare for Heinze and Pepe to try and mark. And I thought they overall did a pretty good job, but he was just a nuisance. He made himself a pest, and like inside the box, he was really difficult to deal with. I think yesterday was just a fun technical player, and had some nice combinations, but he was at fault for that third goal, the game-winning goal, because he kind of tried to dabble on the ball in the middle of the box. Gago got all over him and then just played through Higuain, who again really composed finish to score the winner. But yesterday I liked watching him, and I forgot about him as a player, so it was kind of cool to see him again. And the Echeverria, who we mentioned, like he was great. I thought he was really, really good in this match. And Aola too. He was always one that I kind of secretly wanted Real Madrid to sign, because like we talked about, we kind of had a right back for a while, and obviously Sergio Ramos played there to kind of be a stop. But I always liked Areola, and he could have been a guy Real Madrid could have signed, and he definitely didn't change my mind in this match. I thought he was really, really good. He actually stepped up to take the penalty kick, which I was surprised about.
Yeah, I thought Llorente was going to step up for that too. And, Echeverria is one of the classics, kind of like the Joaquin Muniz kind of figure, who just one club guy, was so good in Spanish football for so long, and it was kind of cool to see him again. On Llorente, just a point, I always liked him. And I remember 2015, 2016 range. I don't remember when it was exactly, but it was a time on the site where I used to do written mailbags and write out like these massive articles, which I don't really have the energy to do anymore. That was around 2015, 2016. I remember someone asked me, and I wrote about like I think there was a period where we could have justified signing him later in his career to be like the guy who could back up Benzema. Incoming, like the veteran presence who might not mind playing a whole lot. And around that time, he wasn't playing well for Juve. He was starting a lot of games, like 2013, 2014. He scored 16 goals in 34 games for Juve in Serie A. The next season, he played about 500 less minutes, but only scored 7 goals. And then after that, 15, 16, he just didn't play at all. I don't know if that was due to injuries or whatnot. But 15-16, he went to Sevilla, played 23 games, scored 4 goals. 16-17 was really interesting because he scored 15 goals for Swansea in the Premier League. And then I think he signed for Tottenham after that. But he was a player anyways that I actually thought was a viable option as a bench player for us. But it never worked out. Maybe for the best. I don't know. But just something that I was reminded about watching him.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I forgot about that because he's linked with us. And so, I would have liked it as well. And I also think, like, kind of going back to the Heinze point, like, this was an example of a stopgap, really. Heinze was a stopgap signing because Roberto Carlos had left and Marcelo wasn't quite ready yet. So we needed somebody. And so Heinze was just brought for a couple of years, did a good job, and that was that. And so sometimes you need those types of signings. And I honestly I know there's been a lot of discussion on like the Rodrigo point, and I've been thinking about it. And part of me, like, I really, really like Rodrigo. So I want to give him more responsibility. I want to see him start, and I don't want to like hurt his development. But part of me also thinks like Vinicius, we signed Eden Hazard for Vinicius. Like we've signed, even Rodrigo, you could argue, was brought in when we already had Vinicius. And like Isco could play at left wing. He was still playing at the time Vinicius was brought in. Like at Real Madrid, you just overcome the competition if you're good enough. And like that doesn't stop us from signing players. And so that's why I'm kind of like thinking to myself, I still think you go after a guy like Serge Gnabry, especially if Asensio is going to leave, and then let the best man win and let competition kind of take its course. And Vinicius had to do the same thing, and who would have thought he would have overtaken Eden Hazard when you look back at the signing, whenever it was in 2019 for Eden Hazard. Like, who would have thought Vinicius would be far and away the guy already at 21 years old? But that's the case. And so I think Rodrigo has to do the same. And I don't think Rodrigo's scared of it. So just kind of where my thinking's been lately on that subject.
I do think there is truth to the idea that true greatness, it will rise to the top, regardless of the circumstance. You know, if you put Cristiano Ronaldo in any era, in any competition, he's going to be so great, he's going to transcend and come to the top, regardless of the competition. And that's what's going to happen if you have... But I do think there is a limit where you have too much depth and really development stalls. But like for the true greats, they'll rise.
The other quick thing too, I was thinking, is like we kind of found ourselves in a similar situation when Ronaldo left. We're all just like, no, we don't want to hurt Asensio's development. We don't want to hurt Isco now getting playing time. Like, let's actually just give these guys playing time. In hindsight, I think we would have been better off just signing players and letting the best man win. So I kind of feel like we don't want to get into that situation again.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, that season that when Ronaldo left, I think there was some justification in assuming that Bale and Asensio would take some kind of mantle, which they didn't. Benzema did rise to the top. Could say that for certainty. But what was our depth? I mean, beyond that, we didn't have much depth. And that was the other issue too. Like we didn't if Asensio and Bale weren't going to rise, it's not like we had many other great options to help us. And I think that was also part of the problem. Yeah. Anything else?
Did we talk about Robben at all?
Oh, no, we didn't. Let's talk about Robben. I think he might be the last one in the line that we haven't talked about. And we didn't talk that much about Van der Vaart, but you know, we can bundle them into one category.
Yeah, Robben, I thought he was good in this game. Like, wasn't a massive standout. And in this season, he was probably up with Higuain, our best player. But he wasn't a massive standout in this one. He did do kind of the typical Robben things. I mentioned earlier that he surprised me with his defensive work rate. But other than that, I don't know. It wasn't a great, and maybe that's why we left him so late and felt like we talked about everything, because I just didn't think there was that much from Robben. And even in his 2 years at Real Madrid, like, he was really good. It just was so frustrating because everyone always said he was made of glass and he was always injured. And just like when it felt like he was getting into a rhythm, he would get injured. And that was just a frustrating thing. And with his time at Real Madrid, he didn't really figure out the injuries until he got to Bayern Munich.
He didn't as obviously with because of his injuries, he didn't amount to much at Real Madrid. But I do think if you look at his overall Real Madrid career, even in the time he played, I don't think he displayed that much efficiency. If you look at his numbers, anyway. I do think, like I've said this multiple times, that I think if you kept him instead of signing Kaká, that would have been pretty incredible to watch him on the right wing, Cristiano Ronaldo on the left wing. Given what we know now, he went to Bayern and basically stayed healthy, relatively healthy, and was incredible at Bayern after this. So I would have liked to have seen that. But I think in this game, what you saw was you could see that his ceiling is that it's like he can just lay devastation to defensive lines. But in the run-of-the-mill game, he can also be very inconsistent. Like, in this game, he struggled to get consistent touches and passes off and beat his man and just find open players. I mean, he had that one incredible pass to Higuain for the wrongly disallowed goal, but in La Liga, even when he was on the field and healthy, he didn't really show his Chelsea form. I think there were definitely spurts where he was awesome, but I don't know. I feel like if you rewatch a bunch of Real Madrid games in this era, I feel like you might run into this Robben type game often.
Yeah.
Anything on Van der Vaart? I don't actually have much on him, to be honest.
Not in this match. I just think he had the nice flick, really nice assist to Higuain, which was that flick. And that's kind of his Real Madrid career in a nutshell. It was like backheel flicks. He scored one or two kind of cool backheel goals, and that was basically it. He really didn't produce much else, and I just felt like he was a repetitive signing. Like, I felt like he was Wesley Sneijder 2.0. Why did we need him? He didn't really fit at all, and it was just weird. And I don't know, he was a good player, really talented player, but was he Real Madrid level? I don't think so. I think he was just a step below that, and he went to Spurs afterwards, which was kind of a weird dynamic, but they had fun Spurs team: Modric, Van der Vaart, Bale, and Peter Crouch, and he was awesome at Spurs. So that was kind of a cool thing that happened. Yeah,
with Van der Vaart, I remember, again, he was the big signing. Didn't he score a bicycle kick or something early in his Real Madrid career? Or some crazy goal?
It was that backheel thing. It was that backheel goal. He scored a really nice backheel goal. Yeah.
I remember him scoring a free kick from a tough angle as well, from distance, from the left side. In this particular game, I thought Guti picked the ball up way better in the 30 minutes he was on the field than Van der Vaart did all game. More noticeable anyway. I think we can wrap it here. This was fun. We have to do these historical segments more, honestly. We should be doing them more this summer because there isn't much going on. So we'll keep us accountable, guys. Make sure, because I know there is at least a couple guys who keep on saying, where are the historical segments? When's the next one? Let us know which game you're watching. They really enjoy this. And quite frankly, I really enjoy it too, because it's always fun to revisit and just brush up on our history. And the past is meant to be remembered. It's meant to be revisited and discussed. That's why we have football. We can't just ignore everything that happened before this. So it's good to do this, and it's good for some of the fans to learn about the past and for us to refresh ourselves as well. So we'll do it again. Maybe next week. Why not? So, Matt, good choice for this game. And everyone go and pledge to Footbalia. $20 a year is not much to keep it going. And also for your own enjoyment. I mean, there's no limit on the amount of games you're allowed to watch. So go and just watch a bunch of Real Madrid's old games. There are a bunch of football classic games. The classics are important for us to watch. Really important. Go watch the classics. We'll be back I think tomorrow, actually. Mehdi, Hassan, and I are going to do something about just some analytical stuff, Real Madrid related stuff. And then Tuesday over on patreon.com/Managing Madrid, Matt and I will put out something. Thursday, again, on patreon.com/Managing Madrid, the mailbag is there with Lucas and I. He's coming back. And again, this week, if you weren't a patron, you missed a couple episodes exclusively that went up there as well. And also, if you're thinking about becoming a patron and you haven't until now and you're planning on going to Vegas and San Francisco, you get a patron discount code to those shows. If you're going to do that, might as well just become a patron and get a discount code there as well. Matt, thank you, man. Appreciate you. We'll chat soon. Take care, buddy.
Thanks, Kiyan. Take care.
All right, before we wrap it up, we wanted to give a shout out to our patrons over on patreon.com/Managing Madrid. They do so much to support the show and make it possible. And we wanted to give a specific shout out to our $10 plus patrons, because if you pledge $10 or more, not only do you get guaranteed responses to your questions, but you also get a specific shout out on the podcast. So shout out to Brandon Alvarez, Willie Reed, Wei Paring, Wamik Jamal, Umar Mahadi, Tyler Simon, Tobias Arroyo Botcher, Tarek Goktas, Talib Salhab, Tahmid Kalam, Sushank Damala, Sujai Wani, Sumanchu Singh, Shivam Tiwari, Sherry Sorial, Sheikh Hatiri, Shamil, Shabaz Sharipov, Sergio Arispe, Santos Solorzano, Samir Z, Said Mahad, Sai Mohan Sasil Kumar, Rodrigo Balmaceda, Rishi D, Phoenix, Peter Powell, Paulo Fierro, Patrick Daifari, Oscar Barrera, Nico Laxo, Nicholas Zapatero Zubiare, Nicholas Moller, Nick Ribeiro, Nelson Masariego, Muxi Thangal, Mowgli, MJ Diego, Michael Zinberg, Marin Myrtle, Martin Ridman, Logan Stahl, Leon Stavronakis, Kunal Tilakar, Crystal Glass, Kevin Rivera, Jose Cruz, John Fernandez, Jason Fitz, Ian Marley, Graham Gerard, Gary Kohut, Frederick Antakiro, Frederick Sundros, Faisal Hamdan, S.A. Davisito, Eloy Enriquez, Edward Sossman, Daniel Williams, Christian Toft, Christian Acosta, Charles Williams, Brendan Powers, Brandon Stevens, Ashik Bashar, Armin Gashi, Armando L, Anton Zrudenko, Anirudh Singh, Alexi Ceniceros, Al, Azaz Hussein, Adrian Rios, Adar Zalukovic, Adam Dorsey, Bella Chow, Barun Ramtin Maghrur, Fabian Moreno, and Daniel Smith. Love you guys all. Take care and Hala Madrid.